the status of those cases. 14 of them are in court, and total cases that are still with a senior public prosecutor is 2 of them, and the cases that have been finalized is 8. The 7 of the 8 where we declined to prosecute are the cases that will be registered or reported by different members of the community, where they will allege that they will have witnessed someone removing a poster from the lamppost and so forth. And when we investigate, we don't find any evidence, and that person will not be able to give us a proof as to who did that. So as such, then the case ordinarily would have been closed at the police station, but our approach this time around was that we'll still present it to the prosecution team, and the senior prosecutor will then decide whether to prosecute that case or not. So obviously, lack of evidence will require that case be withdrawn. And one of those cases, somebody was found guilty, and the person was expected to pay a fine of 2,000 rand or serve 2 months in prison. Up to this morning, that person had not yet paid the fine, or is still behind bars as we speak. This is a total number of persons that we arrested in the province during the election day, and we've broken them down as 40 people, and we've broken it down to different status of all those that were arrested. One of them was found guilty, as I said earlier, and 24 of them are still in custody, meaning they are still in police cells. 2 of them were released as minors in terms of our laws in the country. Those, I must say, are some of those that get excited and be part of the crowd that are taking to the street. As you know, the incident that happened at Tugela district, there were minors that were also involved that were released to the custody of their parents. And one of them, where the prosecution team felt that they can't prosecute, it was a minor who will have removed a poster of a political party and took it home. So somebody registered a case on that, which correctly so they're supposed to, but when we conducted the investigation, we discovered that it's a very young child who simply just take the poster and went and play with it. And unfortunately, we couldn't prosecute further than that. But those are some of the things that we had to deal with, unfortunately. So 4 of them are out on bail, and they still have to appear in court. And there are 4 of them that has been released on warning, and again they still have to appear in court, and the total number of them that also still have to come to court been reflected there. So this is basically just a breakdown. I don't want to bore you too much on it. It's a breakdown of each incident. So I might just say, like I said earlier, the total number of cases that we had on the day is not about those premier that has been making a lot of noise in the media. We included all of them. As you can see, the first one is about assault. Somebody assaulted someone during the election day, will register a case. The others that are preventing people from exercising their rights on election day by blocking them. You know the incident at Ntabamhlope. We opened cases because we arrested quite a number of people on that who are still going to court. In Tannhauser, that's what has been on the media a lot. We know of that incident where there were some officials that will have attempted, or some political members that will have attempted to commit crime by voting twice. Fortunately, due to a good working relationship with presiding officers in those voting stations, they were able to notice that there are people that seems to have appeared in those voting stations more in numbers than they're supposed to. And when they started checking their credentials, and they realized that people that would have voted somewhere else, and they were taking their chance to come and cast the ballot for a second time. And they alert the police, and upon doing that, those people decided to run away, and we were able to arrest some of them in following days. So that's why we're having them in custody, and they're appearing in court. So it's a similar thing that happened also in Sauti. Bergville, we had quite a number of people who were arrested as a result of public violence, and it was covered a lot in the media. Kingindlovu, destroying the voting material, some of the cases that we had. So it's quite a list of them. I'm just indicating here of those where we effected arrest. In total, which, like I said, intimidation, defeating the end of justice, malicious damage to property, violating the Electoral Act, and so forth. So altogether, on 14 of those cases, we're able to effect arrests. So in conclusion, Program Director, I can safely say that all the incidents such as process actions, inter-party conflicts, which there were not much, criminal activities, social issues having impact on elections were swiftly dealt with by the security cluster. So the operations of the cluster will continue until the announcements of the results. We know it's going to happen today, hopefully, and we shall police those celebrations that are going to take place across the province. And we do hope that those that are going to be celebrating, they're going to do so responsibly, and we're going to assist each other to maintain the safe environment within the province. Thank you very much, Program Director.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Mkhwanazi. I am very happy to see that you underscore that the breaching of the Code of Conduct is prosecutable, and we are not paying lip service when we say that people who break the laws during elections can go to jail. So I'm hoping that political party leaders that are here are going to spread this message in communities and announce that the Code of Conduct is part of election legislation, and it has to be respected by supporters of parties. Now, SABC was one stakeholder that assisted in pulling through this election. Many government departments did the same. Otherwise, we would not have been able, as the Electoral Commission, to manage this election without the various government departments that came to the party. Now, to speak on behalf of all government departments, including COGTA, is the member of the Executive Council, MEC Nomusa Dube-Ncube, who I'm asking to come to the podium now. MEC Dube, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Program Director. Wish to acknowledge the presence of our Premier, Honorable Louis Mchunu, members of the Executive Council that are present here today. I wish to also acknowledge the members of the legislature, the Deputy Chief Electoral Officer, the Acting Provincial Electoral Officer, Mrs. Ntomfuthi Masinga, our Commissioner General Mkhwanazi, leaders and members of the political parties, the leaders and members of the observer missions, the diplomatic corps, the IEC staff, the chairperson of the Provincial House of Traditional Leadership in KwaZulu-Natal, Inkosi Yasemadungeni, our security agencies and staff of all the spheres of government, and members of the media, ladies and gentlemen. We stand here today as proud citizens of KwaZulu-Natal, as well as South Africa, to testify that once again democracy has triumphed in our country. Shortly, we will bear witness to the yet another watershed moment, occasion, when our Honorable Premier Willis Mchunu, on behalf of us all, will receive the results marking the culmination of elections that took place in our province and the rest of our country on the 8th of May. This moment makes us really proud that we have, in fact, be admired by the nations for delivering yet another free and fair and credible elections. And this is a reputation that as a nation we have come to really venerate by synonymous with the eyes of the international community that also witnessed the hard-working Independent Electoral Commission. Despite numerous challenges, numerous glitches, the election shown the strength and the resilience of our democracy. From our part, in the government, we salute and take our hats off the IEC team, which have substantially contributed to the evolution and the dynamic growth of the electoral democracy. The same goes to our government, led by our visionary leadership of our Honorable Premier and the leader of government business, Honorable Zikalala, as well as our Premier Willis Mchunu, who, as the election process were announced by the IEC, assembled a team of the members of the executive to assist the IEC in ensuring that it delivers successful election. The provincial government played a pivotal role in supporting the IEC in ensuring elections run smoothly. For those of you who do not know, that the role of the IEC is only to administer and run the election, and government has to ensure that there is infrastructure together with the relevant logistics and the resources so as to run the credible election. This ongoing support was provided with ourselves, COGTA, as the chairperson, which included the Department of Public Works, Transport, Community Safety and Liaising, Education, Health Department, Home Affairs, Public Works, Defense, Military Veterans, Police, municipalities, and many other departments that formed the Joint Operations Center that was working to ensure that the infrastructure is all ready for elections. As the government, we had to support all the 4,885 voting districts, including 115 temporary voting stations. Our support included, in the first place, establishing the infrastructure task team, a technical team that was led by the Director General, which conducted the needs analysis and provided the technical expertise that was needed. We also had to form the district task teams that met regularly and were closely monitored to deliver timelessly in all the requirements. Our deliverables included the temporary infrastructure, such as the tents, where there was none, ensuring that ESCOM power source for the tents, including the LED lighting for the ease of the voter and the counting process. We also had to ensure that all the voting stations had the connectivity. To this end, we worked very closely with ICASA and other cell phone network providers. In some instances, temporary infrastructure to improve the connectivity was installed. We have also needed to ensure that the voters exercise their rights to secure, comfortable environment that had access to water, sanitation services, in which municipalities had done a sterling job. Through the Department of Transport and municipalities, access roads, including those that were damaged by floods, had to be attended to. And we are really grateful to all the teams that worked very hard against all odds to ensure that those roads, in particular in the south coast, as well as in the north coast, as well as in eThekwini, those roads that were inaccessible were accessible, including the last-minute intervention by the SANDF in ensuring that the bridge in Mtonjaneni was ready for people to be able to access the voting station, and we are grateful for all the teamwork that we saw being given by everybody. Our province recently underwent an unfortunate incident during which we lost several lives during the thunderstorms and heavy rains, which left over 70 people dead, as well as a lot of thousands of people that were displaced. This also included ensuring that our famous station, I think this is Mrs. Masinga's favorite station, uKovukeni. And other people, when we tell them in other provinces about Kovukeni, that we had that station is the only one in the country that has to close before 4 o'clock. Otherwise, the hippos will come and they will take over the space, and you won't be able to move out of that place if you don't move before 4 o'clock. And all these logistics, the IEC had to make sure that we work hand in glove to deliver the successful election. Home Affairs officers also played a pivotal role, working tirelessly, even on the day of election, even with the displaced communities. They were able to open on a Saturday, even on the 8th, they assisted a lot of displaced people to ensure that they had their ID document. We are also aware that IEC worked extended hours and on election day to ensure that everybody had their ID, and that millions of our citizens cast their votes in conducive and safe environment. And we really wish to thank all the government departments with the leadership of our Honorable Premier. We're also proud of the role that was played by the government in supporting the IEC so that they focus on their primary role of managing elections without having to worry about the other infrastructure. So we stand here full of confidence and pride that our government at all levels played their major role in ensuring the success of our elections and in ensuring that especially all the voting stations had the infrastructure that was required. As the curtain draws to a close on this election, ushering the 6th democratic administration, we do indeed wish to thank all the role players that ensured that we had all the hands on the deck. We also want to extend our gratitude to the Justice and Crime Prevention Security Cluster that is chaired by Honorable Kaunda for the sterling role they played in making sure that the elections were without any major disturbances. And indeed, General Mkwanazi, as well as the Minister Tele, all were there to ensure that they support in all the work that needed to be done. I know that we even had meetings on the 7th, on the 8th, ensuring that everything really was put in its place for our people to exercise their role. It was the responsibility of government to ensure that elections were held in conditions of peace and stability without any intimidation of both voters and the IEC staff. It is our view that there is no issues that cannot be resolved peacefully through talking and negotiations. We celebrate that effort to exercising the rights that nobody's rights were thwarted. Indeed, no amount of dissatisfaction should be used to justify interference with our citizens' constitutional right to vote. We also wish to express our appreciation to the leaders of political parties for their exemplary behavior throughout the campaign and the campaign period. The elections to date and all parties demonstrated leadership and maturity, and they followed all the rules and the prescript of the Electoral Code, of which they all subscribed ahead of the elections. We do wish to congratulate all the political leaders in KwaZulu-Natal for doing everything in their power to maintain a positive image of our province. During the past 3 days, we all put our differences aside and allowed peace and space for voters to exercise their democratic role. Now the people have spoken. It is the time to take off our campaigning gear and to work together across political lines in the 6th legislature of KwaZulu-Natal to fight the triple challenges of unemployment, poverty, and inequality, and grow our South Africa together. Indeed, to the IEC, Mrs. Masinga and your team, and Mr. Mosari, who had to shuttle between national and the province, and to you, Mrs. Masinga, and your team, who had to hold forth, despite the fact that we had such a large number of political parties that were contesting. It is this time for us to say we send the servants of the people to deliver new, innovative, and creative ways to solve the problems that are faced by our people. This is not going to be an easy task. However, it is not also going to be an impossible task. We really want to say on behalf of the Committee of Infrastructure, as well as the team of the JCPS cluster, we do wish to thank all the MECs for their hard work and commitments that they put, indeed led by our Honorable Premier, Willis Mkhunu, and our Leader of Government Business, Honorable Zika Lala, and the rest of our official led by the DG, Mrs. DG Mkhize, who ensured that she rallies the team even on the 8th to ensure that we indeed as a government, we play our role. Let us work together to grow our South Africa. Well, thank you very much once more.
Thank you, MEC Dube. Can we give her another big hand, please? Thank you very much. Thank you for those very encouraging words. And we really could not have done it without the help of government. And we thank you for reminding us that elections are by nature a massive logistical project. We, as the Electoral Commission in KZN, are the envy of all our colleagues in provinces. They often ask us, how do we manage to do this? How do we manage to forge such a formidable partnership with government and be able to deliver the type of election that we do? So thank you so much. We pay tribute to our provincial government and its leadership, as well as the Electoral Commission. And we also remind us that it takes a whole lot of hands behind the scenes to pull together this national duty. So I am glad that you are able to bring all these aspects together to remind us that we are one nation, and therefore we need to work together to show the pride that we have, and also to make sure that our democracy is sustained and it grows even stronger, despite the challenges that we might be facing here and there. So thank you so much for that very moving I'm going to call it keynote address. Before we proceed, I want us to just try and marinate on what we've just heard and ask the band to perform. Just give us one item, and then we will proceed to get the results. MEC Dube said the people have spoken, so after the performance, we will hear exactly what the people said. So I will hand over to the band to give us a performance, and then we'll take it up from there.
No pressure at all.
Okay. All right, thanks.
Woke up this morning, found a letter that she wrote. She said she's tired, that I'm always on the road. So about to swallow a beat alone. She needs someone more that she can call. She must have told me 1,000 times more. Silent cries I used to ignore. God knows I love her. Give me to her.
All right, well, I'm assuming that's some spiritual music there, which some of those political parties might be needing more than others, I suppose. All right, I'm Flo Ledwaba. I'm with you. I've taken over from Desiree. I'm sure she needs a good break at this point. Still with me in the studio, though, is Ntate Terry Zelani, who is the executive chairman of IMSA. He's still with us, helping us to analyze those results that are coming in. You know that we're almost done with the counting here, sitting at 99.9% of those votes counted so far already. So I think today we'll know officially what's going on. We just came out of the Durban IEC there. We'll go back as well just to get a final assessment of the results coming out of KZN there. And of course, a comfortable win there for the ANC. I'd like to bring in as well Kaya Sitole, who's a political analyst. He's joining us via Skype. He'll also be chatting to us about those results coming in. I'm going to start with you, actually, Kaya. I think it's always interesting for me to ask a political analyst if anything actually surprised you. I mean, you saw that there was a lot of fanfare around the FF Plus getting numbers that I suppose a lot of people weren't expecting them to get. Were you perhaps surprised by that? And what else possibly surprised you coming out of these results so far?
Good afternoon, and good afternoon to the listeners. And I think for me, obviously, the Freedom Front Plus was the big surprise of this electoral cycle. But beyond just the Freedom Front Plus, I'm still very intrigued about not only just the poor turnout throughout the country, but also the very, very poor performance of the African National Congress in KZN, because, of course, that is supposed to be one of their strongholds where they literally simply have to put up a tent and people do show up and vote, and then they give them the type of momentum that then translates into a very good majority at the National Assembly. And I think this year what we've seen is that there's been a very low turnout, and that low turnout has then translated into a reduced majority for the ANC in KZN, and this is obviously translating onto a reduced majority to the National Assembly at large. So
Kaya,
for me, those are the big surprises, the performance of the
What do you attribute this low voter turnout to, especially that of the youth? There was quite a bit of concern about the fact that the youth just weren't rocking up to the polls this time around. Is there a sort of disinterest? Is there sort of just, not worried about where we're going in terms of politics, or just sort of what happens, happens? What really can we attribute to the fact that the youth just didn't sort of show up this time around?
So for me, the young people of the country are actually a subset of the society at large. And there's been a poor turnout throughout the country at large. Society is, for one reason or another, no longer identifying, the 5-year electoral cycle as the one thing where everybody needs to go and participate. So we've got a bigger problem where seriously a lot of people are not showing up to the vote. And of course, the young people themselves, being a subset of society, they are not going to essentially be very different to what society is reflecting. So I think that's what the bigger problem is. But I think also what we need to be able to try and figure out is, long before we have an election date, what are the particular processes that need to be really amplified in order for us to have a very good turnout. And for me, the registration process, where you're still seeing a lot of young people not even registering in the first place, simply means that the lower the registration participation, the lower the eventual turnout is going to be. Yeah. And I think if we could at least achieve some form of universal registration, particularly for young people, then we'll be able to get as many of them to the ballot box on the day as possible. But I think in these instances, there are far too many bureaucratic processes that for young people just simply do not make sense, simply because of the way that they interact with the state and society at large. And until we find a way to figure out how to engage young people and do things in a way that appeals and is accessible and has a proximity towards them, it's actually going to get worse.
All right, Kaya, I'm going to stop with the analysis for a moment there. I understand that we are crossing back then to Durban. There is some sort of an announcement going on there about the results. So let's go back then to Durban, just take a look what's happening there. Am I understanding correctly that we'll be crossing to Durban? All right, let's check the results then instead. Let's take a look at where the results are sitting at the moment. Let's help you there. Take a look at your screen. It should be popping up at any moment now. But Tate, in terms of KZN, I mean, you heard Kaya there talking about the fact that this low voter turnout sort of harmed the ruling party. There was also the question of whether, Jacob Zuma, the former president, might have also harmed the prospects of the ANC in KZN. What are your views? It does seem, though, still that the ANC was quite comfortable there. We're sitting there with 54.2%. What are your thoughts on KZN?
Well, when you look at the results, it is clear that the ANC is in a decline, and that the beneficiaries have actually been more the IFP as well as the EFF. So it is clear that perhaps some of the supporters may have gone to the IFP, and others may have gone to join the EFF. That's why the numbers look the way they are.
Yeah. Should the IFP be happy with that 16.3? I mean, KZN is probably the one province where they really have that sort of hold, I suppose. Should they be happy with that 16.3 at the moment in KZN? I
mean, it's a major improvement compared to the results of the last election. Yeah. So they are now the official opposition, and they should be happy with the fact that they have done well and improve on their last results.
All right, let's take a look at the seat allocation there. Should be popping up on the screen at any moment now. All right, so when we look at the KwaZulu-Natal legislature, 83 seats up for grabs there. Of course, these are predictions with 100% of those VDs counted at this point. The ANC with 44 of those seats, IFP 14, DA 11, EFF 8, and NFP coming in at 1. Interestingly, that the NFP is there. That doesn't surprise you very much. What do you think of that? One seat to the NFP?
Well, NFP has had difficulties since the last election.
Right.
As you remember that they did not even qualify to participate in the 2016 local government elections. Oh. And I think the fact that they did not have representation in local councils has had an effect. But also I think because of the fact that the leader of NFP has not been that well. They went into this campaign without really having a face, of their campaign.
Right.
And therefore, that may have worked to their detriment.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. We're sitting there with the ANC, and I mean, I've said this before, that they seem to still be strong, though, in KZN, but you are talking about the fact that the numbers are declining. So what factor really is the biggest factor in terms of ANC sort of declining in KZN, do you think is the most significant that I'm sure the ANC has to sit back and then sort of reflect on afterwards?
I mean, the number itself, I mean, it's a very important indication that there is a problem.
Yeah.
And therefore, I'm sure they will have to sit down and reflect and try to identify factors that could have led to the decline and try to see how they can improve on their performance.
All right, let's bring back Kaya to the discussion. Kaya, we're sitting here with the KwaZulu-Natal results, and we're talking about what could have affected them at this point. You've taken a look at those KwaZulu-Natal results. Can I just ask the team to put up the national results there for us, please, so that we can discuss it with Kaya as well. Kaya, just a question to you in terms of your thoughts where the results are with KZN. I mean, it does seem that the ANC is still strong there in KwaZulu-Natal. But not as strong as they would like to be. What do you think is the biggest issue here? You see they are sitting at 57.8%. For any other party, that's brilliant. But I suppose for the ANC, where they've had higher numbers before, it's not that great. What do you say about this, Kaya?
I think for me, the key issue that the ANC needs to start interrogating is whether the further away we get from the pre-1994 dispensation and the more the electorate becomes really infused by people who were born long after 1994 who don't have a real, experience of apartheid is. The question that we should be addressing is what is the ANC's growth strategy? And I think what has happened historically is that we've always been looking at the other parties to formulate a growth strategy to penetrate the voting market while the electorate and then say to them, this is what we're selling, this is why it's better than the ANC. But even the ANC itself probably enjoyed the goodwill of really being the liberation movement for at least the first 4 or 5 electoral cycles. And of course, as the electorate evolves and people no longer see that as the primary interaction point with politics, the ANC needs to then come out and say, this is actually the value proposition that we're putting out here. And I think they've struggled with that, not because they haven't tried, but because they haven't actually realized now it is actually now the time to repurpose the party, not just as a liberation movement, but as a governing party that actually wants to get a renewed mandate. And I think for now, the ANC has actually never realized that at some point in time, you actually need to break away from the past and be a more future-focused party. So when you look at parties like the EFF themselves, they look into the constituency that is probably most aggrieved and is probably most disaffected with the current status quo, and then ask the question, what speaks and what appeals to that constituency, and let us talk about these things. So I think the KZN decline is probably going to hit the ANC very hard, because it is probably, if the ANC had said about 3 or 4 months ago, these are where we think our weak spots are, there's no way KZN would have featured as a weak spot, because they simply believe, and a lot of people still believe, that it was sort of a safe seat for them, if you want to call it that. So of course now the fact that the electorate is showing them that actually it's no longer a safer space, we are no longer as convinced, we are no longer as attached to the ANC as we've been for the first 4 or 5 electoral cycles. What are you bringing to us? And the ANC has struggled to articulate that message. I think also obviously the question of Jacob Zuma, you cannot deny that of all the politicians we have in the country, only he and Julius Malema have got this wonderful ability to be as charismatic and as, appealing to an electorate as to convince people to actually say, let me go and vote, if not for the party that this man represents, but just for the fact that he said I must vote for the party. So I think the ANC really struggled in trying to identify the role that they wanted Jacob Zuma in particular to play in this particular electoral campaign. Now, of course, the very essence of what the ANC has done over the past 18 months is to simply say that everything that has gone wrong was a Zuma problem. We're trying to distance ourselves from him. But of course, at the grassroots level, that type of conversation and that type of communication is not as sophisticated or is not as well narrated as the ANC thought it was. So if people are still asking at the grassroots level, what exactly did he do that warranted him being ejected from office, and the ANC struggles to answer that question, and then the ANC then has people who don't have the same capacity or the same charisma to be able to simply speak and charm the voters and say, give us another opportunity. It simply meant that they were shooting themselves in the foot, not just by ejecting from office, but by not coming up with a strategy of saying, how does this man still capitalize on the type of political capital, the social capital that he has with the particular electorate in KZN, and then assist us with the next election, with the 2019 elections. So I think that was their big weakness, and unfortunately, until they find a way to deal with that problem, KZN is probably going to look like suddenly a problem when it is supposed to be as safe a seat as Limpopo and the Eastern Cape are.
All right, we've seen those T-shirts, and funny enough, you mentioned that those T-shirts, Uzuma Wenzeni, a lot of those T-shirts I've been seeing all over social media. But do you think that the ANC will actually see this as some sort of a wake-up call? I mean, you can see the ANC is already celebrating, they're in a celebratory mood. For them, it's a case of, well, we've won again. But do you think there will be a time where they go, actually now, it's time for the work. It's time to get back those voters who perhaps had not voted for us, or those who just actually simply decided not to vote. Do you think that they will take this time to sort of reflect as we go to the, possibly the next elections?
I mean, the reality is that the ANC has lost about 3 million voters over the past 5 electoral cycles. If you look at perhaps their performance in 1999, where they had about 12 million people that voted for them, we are now just bordering on just around 10 million votes that are voting for the ANC. The first question that the ANC needs to engage on is how do we lose not just 1, but more than 2 million voters when we still believe that the things that we are doing are in the best interest of the electorate? So that's the first question that they need to deal with. And the reason I said that this is a big issue is that obviously with every electoral cycle, the electorate grows. So the number of people that are able and qualified to participate in an election grows much further. So of course, if the ANC is seeing a decline in the absolute numbers of people that are voting for us, it then has to ask itself the question, are we still seen by society as the type of party, as the type of structure that actually champions the interests of society? And quite literally the answer is that they are no longer being seen like that. So they need to then take a step back and reflect and say, how did we end up in this particular situation? We all know how they ended up here. The ANC really suffered from the sins of incumbency. The sins of incumbency dictate that for as long as you feel that you've got this massive winning majority.
Let me interrupt you, Kaya. Let me interrupt you, Kaya, slightly. Apologies for that, Kaya. Let's cross over to the IEC. You see those visuals there of the ANC leadership in Pretoria at the ROC, where they are in celebratory mood about the results, the GAUTENG results. You can see those visuals there. And we're going to get an announcement shortly. You can see there, Jesse Duarte. They all seem very happy. They are announcing at the moment. Let's cross over then.
Are you leaving? Okay.
Well, you've just had there the celebrations, I think, from the ANC desk here. So we think it's because they see that GAUTENG has passed the test. Remember, for a very long time, the wait has been anxious. Let me try to get to the Deputy Secretary General of the ANC, Jesse Duarte, to find out what is this noise about. I've just seen you.
It's a noise of happiness.
So why are you happy? You seemed very quiet earlier.
The manifesto of the ANC is now the manifesto of the people of South Africa.
Absolutely, it is a decisive mandate, but we cannot not compare to the previous elections where you've basically dropped.
We've not dropped since 2016. We've in fact increased, and our increase is quite phenomenal from the 2016 elections, which we're very grateful for.
Well, I guess we'd compare apples with apples. 2014,
same electorate, same people. The country doesn't shift, The people don't shift off the sides of the country during an election. They're the same people voting, yes.
But, I think the country is somehow used to the ANC getting 60 plus. So you just dip below that. Psychologically, does it do anything?
Oh, we did quite a lot of extensive research ourselves. And we knew exactly what we were getting, and what you see is what we anticipated. You never heard the ANC itself talking about 60%. We never uttered those words, nor did we utter any kind of percentage. It was pundits and the media who said that. Our research gave us an indication that we would be between 56 and 58%. Of the national vote. And in every province where we are today is what our research gave us. And also that research was based on going to the people very directly, using a cloud-based system to record what people were telling us on the ground, and then making calculations.
Thank you very much, TSG. That was the SG of the ANC there. Basically, they are very happy that they have passed the mark. So they are looking forward to regaining the mandate and governing the country. And of course, they've retained 8 provinces. Western Cape, DA refused with the Western Cape. They are keeping the Western Cape. But we'll see when the official tally is done. At the moment, we are standing at 99.9%. 0.99%. So you can see that it's almost done. Back to you, Florence, in the studio.
Thank you very much, Mzwandi Lembeja. They're speaking to the Deputy SG, Jessie Duarte. They are happy. She is, however, saying that they never said they're going to get 60% or over 60%. It was the media, it was us who said it, it was the pundits. So I guess they're saying that that's a victory for them. It's not them that called for the 60%. Although a lot of the analysts saying that it must be some kind of a knock for the ANC. You can see from that celebratory mood that they're not considering it any kind of a knock. All right, we're still taking a look at the Gauteng results. We're going to cross you over to the IEC Centre here in Auckland Park, where Nozintombi Mia is standing by. Good afternoon to you, Nozintombi. Well, it looks like the ANC has taken it. You would have seen the SG, the Deputy SG, Jessie Duarte. They're all in a celebratory mood. I can see you're sitting with some representatives there of the ANC. What are they saying that side?
Yes, you're quite right, Flo. It's quite a celebratory mood here at the Rock in the province of Gauteng. And we do have some of the ANC members who are going to give us a quick update about their thoughts with the results. You'll recall that the official announcement of the Gauteng provincial results is yet to begin. It should be happening within the next few months, but make sure to give you the entire live. But just to rope in somebody from the ANC, thank you so much, Lebogang Maile. The results have come up. It's not yet the official results, but it seems as though ANC has definitely gotten a victory. What are your thoughts on that?
We are on track in retaining the province, and we are very happy because it means our people have given us a mandate, and we've got an edge over all other parties, and that is good enough for us. All we need to do is to go back and work with our people, form government in the next coming few days, and make sure that we continue with the good work that we've been doing in the province.
We've seen several protests in the province, Alex, Kagiso, and people are talking about the same issues that they have, service delivery issues. How are you going to go back to the drawing board and start looking at the issues of service delivery as the ANC?
Well, we will continue to deliver services, and I think it has to be understood in context that Gauteng is a province a lot of people. Every year we've got about 230,000 people coming to Gauteng, and all of them want houses, they want access to health facilities.
That has anything to do with elections play their part. The Department of Transport had its work cut out for it, because they had to repair the roads and the bridges that were damaged during the flash floods that we experienced in the province. The Department of Education had to make sure that the schools that we use in as our voting stations were ready to be used, and they made sure that they rehabilitated whatever infrastructure needed to be fixed in those voting stations. On the slide is all the other entities that we work together with. This task team doesn't get activated a few months before elections. It's a task team that we activated in July last year already, so that we make sure that the various government departments are able to redirect their budgets to make sure that the venues that we use as voting stations are equipped with the basic infrastructure that we need for a voting station. Recruitment is something that we always talk about. I'm going to say much, but we want to emphasize the criteria that we use when we employ our staff, because it's always an area of interest, because some people still believe that you can find somebody in South Africa that is neutral, which is almost an impossible thing to do. Our basic requirement is that you cannot hold a political office and work for the IEC. Even if you have held political office in the past, you should have at least come out of that position over a 5-year period. We expect a 5-year cool-off period before you can work for the Electoral Commission. There is a lot of other things that they go through, which I'm not going to talk about now, but one of them, they are verified for their criminal records, because we cannot have people that have been convicted of serious crimes running an election. So that's one of the various activities that we go through until we can confirm them as presiding officer and deputy presiding officer. Contrary to what you may believe, there is an 80% pass mark for our presiding officers and deputy presiding officers. So we hope that was demonstrated in the voting stations on election day. In terms of training, we had to train various categories of people. It didn't start this year, it didn't start last year. We start as soon as we know that we have to prepare for an election, from the SAPS to the election observers, domestic and international observer missions who need to understand the election framework before they can go out and observe the elections, our own staff as the Electoral Commission, the detectives units within the SAPS, because we need to make sure that they are ready to investigate election-related matters and therefore have to understand the election framework. So there is a whole lot of categories of people that we train. We also train what we call the contingency members from the SAPS and the SANDF, who are trained not to police elections, but to be ready to take over and run voting stations themselves if it becomes necessary for us to do that in this province. And I hear a word here that kept saying they did. Where our staff felt vulnerable and threatened in our voting stations, those voting stations continue to function, and we really appreciate that assistance. In terms of creating an environment conducive to the elections, we have what we call the PLC, which is the envy of other countries, where we sit on a monthly basis and talk about what we are doing and how we are doing it. We solicit input, we consult the PLCs on a whole lot of things that we do, from how we draw boundaries of voting districts to the framework that we use to recruit our staff. Basically, there isn't a step in the election process that we do not discuss with political parties. One of the main things that we do is that the presiding officers and their deputies that we use, before we can confirm them, we give them to political parties. They have 2 weeks to sit and scrutinize them. If they believe that there is somebody who is not up to the role, they submit that to us. We investigate. Where necessary, we replace them. So by the time we go into the elections, there isn't a political party that contests an election that hasn't had an opportunity to scrutinize the list of presiding officers and their deputies and tell us if they have any objections, whether it's somebody that holds political office in a branch of a political party that we may not be aware of as the IEC. They have the opportunity to do that, and like any other election, we did it again this time, and everyone was happy with what came out of that. We also have an internal conflict management program, which is a program that monitors the state of affairs in our communities and identify any areas of potential conflicts that may erupt and disrupt our election process, which is headed by Mrs. Patsy Banyoni. We have similar people at district level who attend political party meetings, attend all sorts of meetings that are taking place in communities to pick up innuendos that may have an impact in elections, so that we make the necessary interventions before those things flare up into violent conflicts. We also have the multi-party political intervention committee in this province, where there are problems in communities that require a political solution. We meet with all political parties that sit in the PLC, because the PLC focuses mainly on the administrative aspects of elections. If we need to have political solutions in communities that are on conflict, and political parties can assist us with diffusing that, the Multi-Party Peace Intervention Committee is responsible for that. This time we saw them making interventions in Abakulusi Municipality, Ladysmith, your Alfred Duma Municipality, and a whole lot of other areas where we needed to go and talk to political leaders and community leaders to try and make the environment conducive for holding elections. We also have within our own framework as the IEC, the Special Directorate on Electoral Offences that is set up within our own legal department, which is there to work with all the law enforcement agencies to do preliminary investigations on objections and complaints that are submitted to the Commission, and they then advise the Commission whether they need to approach the Electoral Court on all those matters. As usual, for all major events that I had in the country, through the provincial joints and the priority committee, we were able to handle all issues around election security with all the security establishments in the province, and all those structures were activated in July last year already. For the first time in these elections, the IEC got assistance from the European Union to help with the training on election-related conflicts. This training was not only provided for the IEC staff, it was also provided for the stakeholders that we work with, including the members of the security establishments, where we are persuading them to consider alternative ways of handling election-related conflicts before they can arrest people. And it actually worked out very well because we were able to dovetail the framework on the SAPS side, the framework on the NPA side, and the framework on using the community-based conflict resolution mechanisms that we find in various communities. It was first. Dr. Hlongwane did say this was the election of the first. It was the first time we had that assistance, and we are quite happy with the level of skill that has been left behind after that program. The result system is another critical area that we always want to talk about. Before we go into any election, the IEC invites all political parties to second their IT gurus to come and analyze our result system from the back end, something that you and me may not be able to do. They go and audit our result system and satisfy themselves that we don't have any secret algorithms that are built into our systems that change 100 to 1,000 for certain political parties. And I must report that all the political parties that took up that challenge to come and test our systems and audit it didn't come up with any adverse findings. So by the time we went into elections, all political parties were quite comfortable with our result system and the manner in which it functions. How we then manage the results as the Electoral Commission, at the voting station level where things start. We have party agents that are present in all voting stations. Not all political parties had party agents in all voting stations, but it does give us a certain degree of comfort if we at least have party agents from three different political parties that are present in any voting station to make sure that our own IEC staff in compliance with the framework at every step of voting. We then produce the results in duplicate. One copy remains in the window or the door of a voting station for everyone who voted in that voting station to see the results. One copy is then transmitted in a tamper-proof envelope back to our offices where it gets captured. Before it leaves the voting station, the result slip is signed off by the party agents of the various political parties. It gets transmitted through a tamper-proof envelope. When it arrives in all our 44 MEO offices in KwaZulu-Natal, the PLC members, the party liaison committee members are there to first check whether the tamper-proof envelope has not been tampered with on the way to the MEO office, and then the capturing begins. When we do the capturing, once our officials are done capturing, there are independent auditors on site in each of our MEO offices who then also have to capture that very same result. And as soon as what the auditor has captured and what our staff has captured is matching, it's only then that result is finalized and it then becomes available on the website. There were people that were asking, why is it that what they are seeing on the screen and what we are sharing in this center was different? What was available on the news channels was the finalized results that had been audited, but on our side, we knew how many results we had concluded. There was no counting going on. All the results that we had captured needed to go through the auditing before they are finalized and available on the public website. So those are all the checks and balances that have been built into our systems to make sure that at any stage of results management, there isn't a loophole where things can be manipulated. In terms of the framework, by 5 p.m. yesterday, we needed to have received all the Section 55 objections, which are objections that may have material impact on the results that we would have issued. And in KwaZulu-Natal, I can report that in comparison to other years, we only had 4 objections that were Section 55 objections, which are currently being deliberated on by the Commission. 2 of them have been resolved, but unfortunately that window have now closed, where parties may have felt that there is something that happened in any voting station that may have had material impacts on the results of the elections. Political parties are aware of this framework and they have utilized this provision. In terms of the electoral system, in terms of the electoral system, we're still using the proportional representation system. It hasn't changed. In terms of the legal framework, we have 7 days by which to publish the final results in the government gazette, and we believe we are on track as the Electoral Commission to publish the results on the government gazette on Wednesday. Now on figures. Ubab Gwala, that's all you were waiting for. That's what you came. We couldn't just come here and give you this. We had to keep you here for some time. This is KZN in figures. Of the 5.5 million voters that voted in registered in KwaZulu-Natal, 3.7 turned out to vote on election day, which makes out 67%. That's a little bit below the 70% that we are now accustomed to in this province. There are people that should have come out to vote and didn't. We don't know why. Maybe the political parties can answer that one. Spoiled ballots. On the national ballot paper, we had 63,000 plus spoiled ballots. 63,000. Which makes up 1.7%. I must say that in terms of international trends, spoiled ballots shouldn't be more than 2%. If it reaches 2% and above, you are in trouble as a country. So we are sitting at 1.7% on the national ballots in KwaZulu-Natal. And then voter turnout in terms of the provincial ballots, the KZN ballots, we are at 3.6%. The reason the national turnout is higher than on the provincial ballot is because we did have people who voted in KwaZulu-Natal who voted through the Section 24A provision, who are not ordinarily registered in KwaZulu-Natal, who could only be given a national ballot, because if you are not registered in KwaZulu-Natal, you do not get the provincial ballot. So that explains the difference between the number of people who voted on the national ballot and those who voted on the provincial ballot. Spoiled ballots on the provincial ballot is 56,000. Now, that's a seat and above. We do not know why those ballots were spoiled, whether they are really spoiled ballots or they are deliberately spoiled ballots in this province. But that's the figure that we have, because we have to capture all that. But on the provincial ballots, the percentage of spoiled ballots was a little bit lower than on the national. Voter turnout. If you want to know who are these municipalities, in which municipalities did we experience voter turnout, that was highest, that's the top 10 in KwaZulu-Natal. You've got your Umgeni municipality in Harding, Umsunduzi in Pietermaritzburg, KwaDukuza in Stenga, Umshwati in Wartburg, eThekwini, which is eThekwini, Ubuhlebezwe in Ixopo, Umhlathuze in Richards Bay, Dr. Nkosazana Dlamini municipality in Bulwer, Crichton, Ray Konyeni in Port Shepstone, and lastly Umkambatini, Camperdown. So this is where we had experienced the highest voter turnout in the province. And then we also wanted to show you municipalities where there was the lowest voter turnout in the province. I think we all expected this in Okahlamba with everything that was going on. They register amongst the lowest voter turnout municipalities in the province, and so did Ngutu, Abaqulusi in Vryheid, Inkosi Langalibalele, also in the Midlands, Inkosi Langalibalele is your former escorts, Umchezi and Babazane municipalities, where we also experienced a lot of protest on the election day. We don't know whether people were too scared to come out and vote in those municipalities. But then you have Kwanongoma, Danhauser, Ulundi, Upongolo, Edumbe, and KwaMaphumulo. These are the lowest turnout municipalities in the province, where we are not quite sure why turnout was so low. Okay, I'm now going to allow the final results that we've all been waiting for. It is now going to be presented. We have given you sufficient. Those organizations that do voter education can now go back and find out in these municipalities why people didn't come out to vote. Now, the moment of truth. Sorry about that. One exciting thing about today for the media is that you cannot ask me questions after this. I'm sure you are very disappointed. We have had our moments with the media in this results center. Yesterday, as I was walking out of the bathroom, there was a journalist waiting for me at the door of the bathroom. I'm not going to say who that person was, but that's how much we wanted news, and that's how desperate we were for news. At some point, there were reports that 2 voting stations were banned in KwaZulu-Natal, and they were very disappointed when I told them that it is not true. And they kept saying, but which ones are those? I said, no voting station was banned in KwaZulu-Natal. So we didn't have as many news as we expected, but we had our good times. I'm sure we're going to miss each other with the media. Mr. Mozari will come back. And then we can have whatever amount of time you need with the IEC. Because then I can focus on what I'm supposed to do, then he can talk to you for as long as you want them to talk to him. Party leaders. Stay here and don't go. Is that the correct one?
Then the leading party first. And
Yeah.
then you do the, yeah.
Okay, they want to start with the leading party results. And I'm going to ask them to stay here. What we are displaying now is the leading party reports by sequence with the highest political party on top. And we're going to keep scrolling down until you find your party. Can you scroll? Thank you. Can we all see at the back? Hey, ningitholile. Okay, we're just going to scroll until we get to the bottom. Unfortunately, we can't fit this in a slide. You know, we only concluded in the early hours of the morning, so we can't give you the interesting graphs that we would like to present with these results. Yeah.
I didn't even see what.
Who
Let's
noticed it was
get out of Durban. We'll get back to them. Of course, that was the Provincial Acting Commissioner of the IEC in KZN, Domfutu Masinga, talking to us about those KZN figures. You would have heard her saying that of the 5.5 million voters registered, 3.7 million voters, so that's a 67% turnout. She will be giving us those figures. But I think what's important for now is for us to discuss the breaking news stories, and you'll see that the national vote capturing is at this point completed. At some point, we will cross over to the IEC in KZN. I'm going to bring back our guest, Kaya Sithole, who's still with me so we can assess these results. It's done. It's dusted. Kaya, you can see there on the screen, it says 100% of those voting districts are counted. So that's our breaking story then at this hour. 57.5% ANC, 20.8% DA, EFF 10.8%, IFP 3.4%. Then the other parties combined together at 7.6%. All right, Kaya Sithole, I'm going to ask you your assessment so far as you see the results are up at 100% of those votes counted. What do you think of that?
I think, of course, the big talking point of this entire election will be the question of, the decline of the ANC, which we've seen is something that a lot of people suspected might happen, but perhaps it was always a question of how big this decline was going to be. I think for them, having moved from 62% to 57% is something that reflects that all the things that society has been complaining about regarding how the ANC has conducted itself in its capacity as the governing party have really now translated into the electorate to then saying, actually, we are not going to endorse this party. We're not going to renew your mandate if you do not change the way that you've done things. But perhaps I think the big issue here is that the situation might have been much worse had they perhaps not been seen to be really working towards fixing the state. So you've seen some of the things that they've done over the past 18 months, particularly Cyril Ramaphosa appointing the right people into areas that really a lot of things needed to be fixed. That obviously assisted in getting some of the people to say, look, we think they're still on the path of recovery, they're on the path of doing things right. So that arrested the decline. So I think the decline could have been much worse had some of these things not been done. I think also, of course, we always expected that the economic freedom fighters would grow, if not organically, but gently on the basis that what they were able to achieve in 2014, a 6% victory, was really on the basis of a very short time span in which they had to formulate themselves as a party and then start campaigning. So obviously over the past 5 years, they've been able to sort of really start building their grassroots presence, and obviously that would translate into more people being aware of the economic freedom fighters, and some of them then saying, actually, not only are we aware of who you are, but we also do want to support the type of policies and the types of ideas that you're putting forward. So for me, those are the big two talking points, and also, of course, the rise of the Freedom Front Plus. And I think for a lot of people that are then trying to figure out exactly what that rise is predated on, I do suspect that the DA's inability to really come out as a party that stands on a few core key principles that everybody seems to understand has not worked in their favor. So if you talk about questions around the land expropriation issues, the DA prefers to intellectualize these things. But unfortunately, the way politics works is that unless you can create soundbite that makes people very aware and very clear on what your stance is, it becomes difficult for them to engage and really deal with the nuances. So if you look at the EFF, for example, they're very explicit and clear in their stance. You might not agree with it, but it's easy to understand. Yeah. Similarly with the Freedom Front Plus, you don't have to agree with what they say, but at least you know what it is that they're saying, and there is no debate around it. There is no confusion around it. And I think the DA, in trying to be this, holistic party that talks about one South Africa for all, which means they need to embrace everybody and not alienate anyone, they've then struggled to really identify a few core issues that people can say, this, if anything happens, at least the DA will stand on this one. So when people see you as a party that blows anywhere the wind blows, it does really expose you to the possibility that if an election is really centered around a few particular issues, and in those issues you are not seen as having really nailed your mast to some particular point, then of course people are going to gravitate towards the people that have made their stance clear. So some of these voters might actually come back to the DA later on, provided that the issues at the next election, whether it's the local government elections or the national elections, are a bit different, and the DA is able to then communicate and articulate its stance, unlike what they've done in 2019.
Well, Kaya, I mean, that's very interesting what you're saying about the DA. Do you feel that they might be in a situation where, damned if you do, damned if you don't? I mean, you can see with the FF Plus, they know who their market is. They know who they're talking to. Possibly a lot of the farmers would have voted for for them. A lot of the Afrikaans community would have voted for them, so they know who their people are. The BLF, for example, or the EFF, they know who their people are, what they call the woke blacks, I suppose. Is the DA finding itself in a position where they don't know actually which team, I suppose one can say, to side on? And should they then strategize and say, you know what, actually this is who our people are and this is who we're talking to, which is actually what, to talk about the elections where we saw Trump winning in the US, he knew who he was talking to, and a lot of us were surprised about him becoming the president. And I suppose that's a similar sort of surprise we're having with the FF+, where some of us might have thought, well, they won't be, they won't make it this election, they're not going to get a lot of votes, and here we are. They got a lot of votes because they had a firm stance, as you mentioned, to the issue of land. So what then should the DA do going forward? Because I suppose they are in a point of being confused, because they are saying to the black electorate, hey, we are here for you, and then they are saying to the white electorate, we're also here for you. So are we then saying that the black and the white electorate want two different things then?
I think for me, the problem with the DA is that internally they know exactly what the limitations are. And the way I look at these particular limitations is that for them, they might know what it is that will probably work best for the white voters that they're trying to get on board. They might know what works well for the black voters that they're trying to get on board. But unfortunately, in some of these instances, there tend to be irreconcilable ideological issues that are central to each of these constituencies. Take the example of BEE, for example. So last year, the DA came out and simply said that they are disowning the concept of BEE. It hasn't worked, and they're simply saying that this is not the way things ought to be. Now, of course, there is the reality that there are some black people that the DA is trying to appeal to, and for these black people, BEE is seen as an instrument of intervention. It may not have been implemented properly by the ANC government, but it's still an instrument that gives them an opportunity, that gives them a pathway of really getting up the economic ladder. So if you then come out as a political party and simply say we're disowning this process without actually putting an alternative out there, you create the type of anxieties that then lead these voters to say, well, actually, these people are not championing our cause. Similarly, if you're on the other side and looking at the white voters that the DA is trying to cater to, these white voters would have been the ones that say, look, BEE is something that is a threat to us. We do not like it. We do not want to implement it. So the DA says we're disowning BEE. That's fine as an inception
Sorry, Kai,
point.
I'm going to have to cut you there. I'm going to have to cut you there. There is an announcement. Apologies to you, Kaya Sitole. We're going to have to cut you there. We're going to have to cross to the Johannesburg election center.
2,771 voting district results have been concluded. This province has registered a total valid votes of 4 million. Start from the political party that is number 5, ACDP. ACDP received about 30,604 votes, which signifies 0.71%. And it is followed by the IFP, which got about 38,231 votes, and it gives a percentage of 0.89. The Economic Freedom Fund fighters received 633,849 votes, and the percentage point that they've received is 14.68%. And it's followed by the Democratic Alliance, which garnered 1,185,580 votes, which gives us a percentage of 27.4%. The African National Congress received 2,167,116, which signifies about 50.19%. These are the results of the provincial legislature in Gauteng. We have printed, as you know, that this province was contested by 36 political parties, and the team is readily available with the detailed reports for the rest of the political parties. Ladies and gentlemen, I wish to thank you for your patience, because we had to painstakingly ensure that we don't release inaccurate results. We thank you for your patience and your understanding. Thank you.
Sure.
All right, that's the election centre in Johannesburg in Auckland Park. Of course, we're getting those results for Gauteng. Joining me now is Mary Harris, political analyst and director at Ipsos. And of course, a lot of people know you for predictions, but you've said to me, it's actually not predictions, it's more possibilities. Just tell us more about that correction, because a lot of people say Ipsos predictions.
Well, actually, when we do a study, it is true for the time when the study is done. So if we did a study on the 8th of May, obviously the results will look slightly different. We did this particular study, the last one before the elections. We did face-to-face interviews from the 22nd of March to the 17th of April. So it's true for that time. And then we have, obviously, you look at the results, you look at what's happening, you look what's going on in the country, and things change. And you take the best step you have. And we can talk a little bit about how we get there.
Yeah, I actually want to, I'd like to talk a lot about the FF Plus, because it's really an interesting one. And the fact that it seems Ipsos did actually pick up that this might have gone this way, because I think a lot of people might have been a little bit surprised as to how those results came out. But just, I'd really like to get into how these surveys are conducted and how you do your calculations. There was, some concern, about how you would reach the deep rural areas, and are you actually getting an accurate assessment of really what's going on and the trends of how people are voting, and if they are changing the patterns with which they vote. So how do you really do your sort of surveys and calculations?
Obviously, we have a formal questionnaire that's translated into different South African languages. We believe it's very important to interview people in their home language, because then they're just more free to say what they want. Right. Then to do this, the sample is actually quite a process, and I will try and give it to you in a few sentences. We do area stratified probability sampling. Now, that's a whole mouthful, but it basically means that we look at the country as a whole, all 9 provinces, assign interviews to the 9 provinces, and then within the province, we look at different settlement patterns. What I mean by that, some metro areas, cities, large towns, small towns, villages, and rural. If we look, for instance, say, let's take Limpopo province. There's no metro area in Limpopo, but Polokwane is a city. So we look at that, then we look at the smaller towns, Makopane, Modimolle, Palaburwa, whatever, and we assign interviews to that, and then also to the rural areas. And a very, very important thing is that we do face-to-face interviews. We go into people's homes. The interviewers have a starting point where they start working from. In a household, they will list all the adults in the household and choose one randomly. So this interviewer that works in, say, a village somewhere, does have no control over the person they interview, which is a good thing, because he cannot choose somebody that he likes or is friendly or is pretty or whatever. He has to interview whatever his instructions tell him. And that is how we get a representative sample. It is a little bit like a cup of coffee. And the sample is like a sip out of the cup of coffee. It tastes the same as the cup of coffee. Right. So that's how a sample works. And then obviously we get all the results together. It takes, well, about a month in field, as I said to you, from the 22nd of March to the 17th of April. It's a lengthy process, because you have to go back 3 times if you don't get your original person that you selected. So it is not just for standing somewhere on a corner and ask people how they will vote. Right. And I think that is the strength of Ipsos, that we actually do these studies in the homes of respondents face to face and really get to the bottom of what they think and feel. We also give them a paper that looks a little bit like a ballot paper on which they mark their choices. So it imitates a secret ballot, and people feel free to answer.
I'd like the team just to put up the graphics here of what the Gauteng legislature results look like. You'll see that. There we go. Gauteng legislature. The ANC sitting at 37 seats, or 50.7. The DA, I'm actually going to ask you just to look at what you at Ipsos had put there, so we can just sort of gauge where you were. The DA sitting at 20 seats, 27.4%. The EFF, 11 seats, 15.1% there. And then you've got the FF Plus coming coming in at 3 seats, 4.2% of the votes, and the IFP is 1 seat, 1.3%, and then the others combined 1 seat, 1.3%. So let me then ask you, if you can just refer to your notes there from Ipsos, what were your possibilities in comparison to what we have there as the sort of final score?
Yeah, we did not publish provincial results, but we did publish opinions about the provinces, so we can have a look at that. So first of all, the first thing I said about the Gauteng was the ANC draws support from all over the country, but especially from Gauteng and KwaZulu-Natal. So that's true.
Correct,
but what's very interesting is that the last few years, the ANC strong point has always been KZN. The last few years, it has moved to Gauteng. They draw more support from Gauteng than they did from KZN. The DA draws more support from Gauteng than they did from the Western Cape. And the EFF also draws more support from Gauteng. We can see how high the contestation was. I said that the ANC is like the ruling party, should also achieve a majority of the votes in KwaZulu-Natal, the Eastern Cape, and the heavily contested Gauteng. A lot of people disagreed with us. They said the ANC will never take Gauteng if they looked at the 2016 election results. And actually, you know, there's two important things. You can't only work on past results when you want to look at future results. You need to take a gauge of the temperature on the ground. And I think this is what happened. It shifted from 2016. And if we look at the overall results, it's clear that things shifted from 2016. So I am, on the one side, very, very happy.
Yes, you got it. Yes, you got it. I actually want to have more discussions from party to party, because for me, there were some interesting points and for me, some surprises. I see you're not very surprised. So we will continue with our conversation, but we're going to cross live then to Nozintombi Mia, who's of course at the Johannesburg Election Centre here in Auckland Park. And I did see at some point with the ANC in celebrations. What's happening now, Nozintombi?
Yes, Flo, the announcement, the official announcement of the Gauteng results, the Gauteng province results have been made. And just to give you a quick recap, 6.3 million voters were registered to vote. However, 4.3 million voters cast their vote on the 8th of May within the 2,700 voting districts. And just to recap again quickly the numbers, the ANC coming in the lead with 50.19% of the votes, the DA at 27.4% of the votes, garnering 14.68% of the votes, and those the top three political parties in the Gauteng province. Just to get a quick reaction from some of the political parties. Lebogang, thanks for joining me again. You garnered 50.19% of the vote. What is your reaction?
We are humbled and we are also happy. We want to take this opportunity to thank the people of Gauteng for continuing to demonstrate confidence in our ability to lead as the African National Congress. And we promise them that we will continue with the good work that we have been doing since 1994.
Again, the persistent issues, you know, which are the districts or which are the particular metros in the three big metros in the province that you'll be keeping a very close eye on?
Well, I hope our opponents who are running the other two metros, the DA, will cooperate with the provincial government, because one of the is that in the last term they have not been cooperating with us, and they were operating like they're in an island. So we are not going to tolerate that, because we want to work towards bettering the lives of our people. And we are saying today we send an olive branch to them to work with us where they govern. We will work with them in the province for the betterment of our citizens.
Lebogang Maila from the ANC extending an olive branch to the DA. You've garnered 27.4% of the votes. What are your thoughts to this?
Obviously, it's not what we thought, but that's the results which we have. We have to use what we have to serve the residents in this province. But we're looking forward to increase more seats going forward. That is what we are committing ourselves to do. Because the more numbers you have, the better you serve more people. And even the pace and the speed, it becomes quicker on the basis that we've got more numbers. Because when you are few and there are more people referring a lot of issues to you, it becomes more difficult for you to react quicker. But yeah, we're really happy for the voters who gave us this mandate, and we will honor them.
The numbers seem to have dropped for the DA. What are your thoughts about this? What do you think really caused the decrease in the numbers for the province?
I think it's just a challenge that you need to do more. Obviously, when you look at the number of voters who voted and the number of registered voters who didn't vote, that tells you that almost 2 million registered voters didn't vote. It's a challenge for us to say, how do we reach these registered voters? And over and above that, we also have about 3 million unregistered voters in this province. So you've got about 5 million residents in this province who didn't participate in this election. So it's just a challenge for us to say, let's go and engage and talk so that they participate in our democracy, because their participation actually promote the democracy which we need to always promote and defend.
The ANC has extended an olive branch. It's been quite difficult since 2014 in local government with tensions between the ANC and the DA. How do you think that this olive branch that's been extended to you will factor towards making sure that the citizens of Gauteng get effective service delivery from both the DA and the ANC?
Prepared to work with the ANC when providing quality services to our people. We also got frustrated. Emin Mashaba has been trying to extend his hand to MEC for local government, who has been playing his games, and we hope that now they are going to change probably and have a new MEC who understand that we need to prioritize needs of our communities. And also, Emin Mashaba has been fighting corruption left and right, and we're saying don't protect people who are implicated. Allow the due processes to take place, because we talk about the rule of law. So if that is what ANC is prepared, we are going to work with them, because at the end, it's all about serving our residents and making sure that they get the best quality services.
Going back to the drawing board, key issues came out that the electorate has highlighted: the issue of transformation within the political party, the issue of the DA being harder on some of the issues that have come out in the province. What is your strategy going forward in terms of recouping the numbers that have been lost and also rebuilding yourself as a brand?
As indicated, that we are committing ourselves to build one South Africa for all, and this is the commitment based on certain values, and this is the value of freedom, fairness, opportunity, and diversity. So anyone who subscribes to those values, we're going to welcome them going forward, because that is what we want to do. We want to build a successful country, and how you build it is when you engage a lot of people from different backgrounds, as long as we have got an understanding of what needs to be done. So we are going to do an introspection, why we lost what we lost, why we didn't gain where we're supposed to have gained, and preparing ourselves for the next local government elections. So it's always readiness. It's one elections, after that you join a course for another election. So we are committed, and we are going to sit down and make sure that we reprioritize and reposition ourselves for the next local government elections.
All right, thank you so much. Flo, there you hear it. We've heard reaction from the ANC. We've heard reaction from the DA, the two biggest winners of the province of Gauteng, and the ANC saying they're going to extend an olive branch to the DA so that there can be effective service delivery for the citizens of Gauteng who've cast their vote and made their concerns very clear to the political parties. We'll be giving you more coverage of some of the smaller political parties as and when they do make their way back to the floor here to the provincial centre in Gauteng. Flo?
Right, thank you very much. Nozinto will be coming to us from the Johannesburg IEC Centre here in Auckland Park. Interesting that the DA representative there saying that, the results are not what they thought they would be, and I am still sitting with Mary Harris. We'll continue to talk and get some political analysis and what Ipsos had predicted would happen. And of course, the DA can't be too happy with the fact that they dropped in the Gauteng province. So we'll chat more about that in a short while. But for now, though, let's cross back to Pretoria, the IEC Centre, the Rock there, where Mzondile Mbeje is standing by to talk to us about what the occurrings are there. I see that the ANC is still quite happy and in a celebratory mood. We'd heard earlier you were talking to the Deputy SG, Jessie Duarte, and she was saying that they're elated and that they're not the ones that called the 60%. It was everybody else saying that the ANC should be aiming for a 60%. It does seem, though, that they weren't too confident themselves that they would get to 60%. An interesting one I just picked up on what Jessie Duarte was saying there.
Very interesting, but they are quite overjoyed, though, because they've been able to retain all 8 provinces, and of course they are victorious in the national election. But what is interesting again is that they've quickly moved out of the hall here where everybody is, because as soon as that board behind me declared 100%, then IEC started with the preparations for the official announcement. Flo, the official announcement, as we did speak earlier, will be happening at 6 o'clock. So they will have to make arrangements because it will be done here. I mean, if you can just have a look at what already is being done in terms of preparing, because the work seems to move quite slowly, and I think they want to do it quite quickly. The people are already putting the systems there and removing that which is not needed. But of course, it will be interesting when that announcement is happening at around 6 o'clock, because that's where you will then get to understand clearly who's got how many seats. So we did our own projections earlier. I mean, ANC, we projected that it will get in the region of 232, and perhaps the DA at around 84. The EFF perhaps at around 40, 43. So, but we will know that when they make this announcement here, when they have concluded everything here. As I'm speaking to you, Flo, the ANC outside of the IEC is having a press conference, I guess, to update the nation about perhaps its plans, about celebrations, because they somehow managed to pull through in Gauteng, and they said here, and you could see that at some point they themselves were not confident that they were going to pull through, but somehow they managed. So that's what's going to be happening later on in this hall. The official announcement will be happening as the votes have been declared 100%.
All right, Mzandile Mbeja there. Thank you very much for that. Of course, we'll be going in and out and crossing to you back and forth at the IEC Centre in Pretoria, the Rock, where we've been crossing quite a bit and significantly during this entire week. And as you would have heard Mzandile saying that the official announcement will be taking place at 6 p.m. this evening. So please do stay tuned for that. But what we have at this point is pretty much what it is. But of course, we have to await that official announcement by the IEC at 6 p.m. Let's take a short break. After the break, we continue with our analysis of the results, so those numbers and what we're seeing in front of us, and with